Dude, I bit the hell out of my tongue yesterday during stream while I was playing the main story, and it still hurts the day after. Do you think that one dude who changes our hairstyles in this game can also, like, give me a new tongue or something? Let's talk about the main story quests for the Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker patches. And this would be impossible to do without spoilers for the newest stuff, so this is your spoiler warning for right now. 6.5 main story, spoilers ahead, people. So let's do this. And if I talk funny, assume it's my tongue, because I'm fairly certain I almost hole punched it. Well, the Void Arc has seemingly reached its conclusion, and well, what do I think of it? I think there's some pros and cons to this. When you're going off the back of the Endwalker 6.0 story, which is one of my favorite narratives ever put to the video game medium, I hold it in extremely high regard, and you're going to transition into a new story that's always going to pose a lot of issues and a lot of challenges. Understandably so, but these challenges still present themselves. How do you get the player invested in a new story coming off the conclusion of one that spanned 8 to 10 years? Well, you use similar themes and concepts that were always just kind of left there with a loose thread, and you pick that up and you just start pulling. And that's what they did. It initially started as us going on an adventure with Estanian to go find some treasure, a la One Piece, which is an aesthetic that we need more of, by the way. And it transitions into us going to save a dragon in the Void, where we meet Zero, who is a new character. And for a character that is introduced relatively recently in the main story, I really liked her as a character. I think this is one of the strengths of Creative Business Unit 3's writing team when it comes to characterization. They are great at introducing a new character and just making them work and fit. Because one of the funny things they utilized Zero for, which is one of the reasons I think I liked her so much, was that she worked as a tool, as a mechanism, to kind of finalize or wrap up certain characters' story arcs, like Julius, like Thancred, and stuff like that, where you have her going from place to place and essentially learning the lessons that everyone else had to learn throughout their main storylines, and Zero kind of absorbs them like a sponge so that she can act as like the Warrior of Light analog, like us, for the 13th. Because it all culminates in her staying behind in the 13th with Golbez to try and reclaim their world. Okay, cool. I do agree in a lot of places throughout these patches. I think this is one of the main issues that they ran into here. It felt dragged out and felt like filler. Like, take for the main story we just got, there's a large chunk of it where we're just in the first, going from place to place, essentially recapping what Shadowbringers already did. Do we really need that? Or could you have segmented that to be a side quest in some capacity? Or could you have done it something akin to, say, what they did in the Alliance raid, where, okay, if you want to, you can go and talk to the gods one-on-one, but if you don't want to, you just want to skip to the next main plot point, you can do that. I would argue give the player the option there, but they decided to have us just go from place to place. It feels a little bit like padding and slows the pace dramatically, but the pace does pick up eventually. And I think certain parts of the main story for the patches of Endwalker do feel that way, where it feels like, okay, we could have condensed this in such a way to where we can go more bang, 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 because that's a part of the pacing for the patches that I do think is important, because we only get like 7 to 10 quests an update, and we then have to wait for like 4 months for another update. So if you're like me, you want to spend that doing really important business and actively progressing the main story, not just essentially glorifyingly recapping Shadowbringers. That was my main issue with it, but I do still think that it was nice to go back to the first and just see how everyone's doing. I just think maybe that should have been optional. Outside of the Reen bit, the Reen bit I think was really well handled because it furthered her own individual story. Now, when it comes to Golbez, I don't think he'll be known as one of the most, like, compelling villains of all time, especially within the confines of Final Fantasy XIV. Hell, we're just coming off the back of characters like Hermes or Meteon or Emmett Selk, characters that are in like the highest of echelons for me. Xenos as well. And we come into Golbez, and he's kind of just his story arc from Final Fantasy IV if you squint a little bit. I found him fine enough because I understand what his role is. His role is not to be a character in the likes and in the echelons of, say, like Emmett Selk, right? He's not meant to do that. He's kind of meant to be a tool to help further the character of Zero. Because that's what I really think these patches are for. The patches kind of served as this, like, little bit of world building to set the stage for a story that I firmly believe they will pick up down the line. Because I think we'll see Reen, I always say a name wrong, by the way, so just like bear with me on that. Reen and Gaia, and I think we'll see Zero and Golbez again. I think they're setting these up, because there's certain parallels here, if you like pay attention a little bit, there's certain parallels that they've been like lining up that are very intriguing, because they're almost one for one. I think this is a story that will be picked up down the line, maybe in like 8.0, or even in the patches of 7.x, or even towards the end of 7.0, depending upon where that story goes. So while we may walk away saying, okay, well, now we're just completely transitioning to go interfere with an election over in Brazil, or like Final Fantasy Brazil, what was the point of all that we just did? Well, to me, it's setup. Sometimes in the short term, it is hard to differentiate when something is being planned for the long term. And remember how much foreshadowing there happened to be in A Realm Reborn that came into play later on in games like Shadowbringers and Endwalker? I feel like they're doing something similar here. Like, if you play through A Realm Reborn and you do the Crystal Tower section, you may be going, okay, that was cool, but like, what was the point of this? Grand scheme-wise, right? Like, okay, that's a cool little mini story, but probably not gonna have that much importance. Then Shadowbringers happens when it's like, oh, okay, so that kind of was the jumping off point for everything. I feel like that's what the Endwalker patch stories is for. Now, those parallels I was just talking about, it seemingly is that they're setting up each of the shards to have one light aspected character and one darkness aspected character. For the first, you have Reen, who is the Oracle of Light, or at least aspected towards light, and you have Gaia, who is aspected towards darkness. For the 13th, you have now Zero, who's a paladin, aspected towards light, because she had a Final Fantasy IV moment, and you have Golbez aspected towards darkness. It is interesting how they are setting up these parallels between the shards right now. For me, having played this game for as long as I have, since around the start-ish of Stormblood, like 4.1-ish, they are setting down the groundwork to be able to take this up and run within the future. Now, you may be asking, Jmulls, cool theory, kind of an issue though. What about the source? Well, we had that with Vana and Hydaelyn. Hydaelyn and Zodiac, we had that, but they're gone now. So, who's left? Well, maybe the character known as the Warrior of Light and the Warrior of Darkness. I'll play a character. I think we kind of fulfilled the role for both. Or, what they're going to do is introduce our dark counterpart in Dawntrail, and have us fully take up the mantle of the Warrior of Light and really lean into those elements. We've had Warriors of Darkness on the source before, but they came from the first, right? But right now, with the characters that we have at our disposal right now, Zero's back in the 13th, we are here on the source. So what I think is, right now, if I had to pick, we would be fulfilling the role of both Warrior of Light and Warrior of Darkness. We are essentially balanced. What they could do is introduce a counterpart to us in 7.0 or 7.x or whatever, or somewhere down the line, but right now this is the stage that I think they're setting up. Because I think a lot of the main story for like 8.0 and beyond will not only deal with the characters and worlds and like locations of Atheris, but also the shards. Because I think they're clearly setting up we're going to go shard hopping at some point down the line, and I think one of the main themes that we will see is that there will be a character aspected towards light, and a character aspected towards darkness. And that at the end of the story for each of these shards, we'll leave the world behind with these two characters kind of like taking up the reins of finding balance for the worlds and the shards. That's what I think they're setting up, and I'm really curious to see what the payoff will be. Because I could easily see us having some kind of like multi-shard threat down the line, and then we're on our like back heel, we're down and out, we need some help. Our freaking little like earpiece like buzzes in, and we just hear like Reen or Zero go on your left, and all of these warriors or oracles of light and darkness like team up with us in one big Avengers Endgame-esque moment. I can see something like that happening down the line, but they're building up to it. This is the start of like a 8 to 10 year story arc that they're going for here. So they're going to introduce concepts and themes slowly and over time. I don't mind the idea for Dawntrail being, let's just go to Brazil and chill. I don't mind that, because I don't think that will only be the thing that we do there. I think they'll slowly start to introduce these themes and concepts, and we'll have some kind of like larger threat to deal with that'll start to help transition us into these overarching narrative that they're going for here. Because I do think that the story in the patches of Endwalker will be brought back into the future and will be of significant importance. Maybe that's just copium on my part. I'm fully willing to take that on the chin if it is, but I do think that with the quality of the writing we have received in this game so far, they have not given me a reason to really doubt their potential at foreshadowing or retrofitting stuff that already came before in a new light, a la Answers. and how Answers was kind of like retrofitted to work with the Nas storyline. And they did an immaculate job at that. There's no problem with retrofitting stuff that came before if you do it well. So yeah, I'll be extremely interested to see how this story goes from here. Because we know like barely anything about Dawntrail. We've seen like a handful of zones, and we know like a rough outline of like what we're doing there. And then we're gonna have like a bit of a tournament arc with the other Scions, which is cool. But yeah, this definitely feels like 6.1, where it was advertised as us going on a One Piece-esque adventure with Estinian, and then it turns out into a giant void spelunking adventure on the 13th moon. We go and rescue a dragon from the villain of Final Fantasy IV. They can easily transition this into a big overarching story, and I think they're doing that. They just wouldn't advertise it here because you would want that to be a big plot twist when the players actually have that in their hands. It will be interesting to see where the story goes from here. Now, I can understand people's like hesitations or critiques with the story we got in the patches. I do think it was padded. I do think you could probably have handled this in like, say, 3 patches overall if you like condense certain like filler arc moments down a bit. I think you could have handled it like that. And that I think in my opinion, that is a legitimate critique. I think they took this story that could have easily been fit into 3 patches worth of main story, and they wanted to expand it out into 5 to give them time for the expansion. I think that was what happened, but I do think later down the line, looking back on this story that we got with Golbez and Zero, we'll be way more happy and optimistic about what happened, because I think these themes and concepts will come back into play down the line. I don't really have a doubt in my mind about that. I don't think that you do all this setup and world building, which is what I feel these patches were all about, just to never bring it up again. I think they have a plan, they have a guide that they want to follow. It's just hard to theory craft it because we're at like step 1, whereas in like Endwalker we were at like step 20. And even then, Endwalker went in directions we never expected it to. So yeah, I think when it comes to the story of Final Fantasy XIV, the future is extremely bright. I do like the character of Zero. I understand why some people may not have, and I understand, I think this is the biggest critique that some people will have with the Endwalker patches. They were extremely predictable. I was on copium that maybe Zero would join us because I thought, you know, her staying behind to help the 13th rebuild her world would be a little bit too predictable, but they did go that route. I still think that she'll come back in the future in some capacity. I don't believe this is the end, just goodbye for now. I think they were like, okay, we have this story with Zero and Golbez we need to tell for the 13th, but we can't really get this to work in 7.0. Where do we put this? We can just slot this into the patch story. It'll be main story because we need people to be able to play this and understand and know these characters and know the development that's happened and to build up this world and to set things up to the future. Okay, we can tell this story in the patches. Maybe it would have worked in 3 patches, but we need to expand it to 5. And then with 7.0, we can really get into gear with this, like, story in the new world. I think that's kind of what happened. It may be a little bit rough and handled awkwardly in the moment, but I think down the line it will pay dividends. Is that an excuse? No. It's just a matter of, yes, it could have been handled better, but I do think they'll probably handle it better in the future. Because I think this Endwalker patch stories were in a bit of a unique position, following up 6.0's grand conclusion and acting as an interlude before 7.0 really goes into maximum overdrive for the next story arc. It was a bit of an awkward position and a unique situation, and I think that's why we got what we got. I still enjoyed it, but them's the breaks. So I think I'll call the video there for the day. By the way, P.S. Is it just me, or have like the facial animations for all the characters across the board in 6.5 been like S tier? Like, where did this come from? We've always had like kind of funny and good facial animations for these characters before. I don't know if I've just been a while, but they were like S tier this patch. Very emotive, very much expressing emotions. It was really good. And I really want to see what 7.0 has. Also, what these like last 3 quests we'll probably get in Part 2 will be. I imagine it'll mostly just be setting us up to go to the new world. I imagine that'll be the case. Maybe there'll be some kind of like follow-up with Zero and Golbez. I don't know about that though. Be interesting to see. So I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye everybody, until we meet again!